So we come to our 13th study on this missionary of genius, looking at the life of Paul, his problems and predicaments. Last time we left it in Philippians, where he said that he eagerly expect and hope that I will in no way be ashamed. What's Paul talking about here? But will have sufficient courage so that now, as always, Christ will be exalted in my body, whether by life or by death. This was coming up to the end of the 2 years in Roman prison, well, under house arrest actually, and nobody yet had turned up to accuse him, but the time was getting close. So if they turned up, this high priest or his lawyer or Sanhedrin members, who goodness knows what could happen to him. So what did happen next? Was it life or was it death? And as I pointed out in the last study, Philippians is a letter of rejoicing, which is quite incredible considering he'd been locked up for more or less 5 years, and yet there's an ambiguity in it. And it shows you in Philippians 2:23-24, he's still optimistic. He says, I hope therefore to send him, Timothy, as soon as I see how things go with me. I know my trial's coming up. I know the 2 years is coming up. If nobody turns up, I won't have a trial and I will release. As soon as I know how things go, I will send Timothy. And I am confident in the Lord that I myself will come soon. So, was that confidence unfounded? Or did Paul actually get to Philippi to see them, to thank them for the gifts that they had given him? Well, in these last 3 letters, what are called the pastoral letters, 1 and 2 Timothy and Titus, clearly Paul was released, and that he wasn't found guilty, that the trial probably didn't take place. And in these letters we read of Paul visiting places he had not visited in Acts. He couldn't have fitted them in. For instance, he talks about being on Crete in Titus 1:5. Well, he docked there, I think, on his journey to Rome, but that's about all. And he talks about Nicopolis in Titus 3:12, and he never got anywhere really near that. And he visited places in different order or with different people. For instance, here's one. He talks about in 1 Timothy 1:3, as I urged you, when I was going to Macedonia, remain at Ephesus. Well, in the book of Acts, it was the other way around. In Acts, it was Paul who stayed behind in Ephesus while Timothy went to Macedonia. So if you look at the detail of what is in these pastoral epistles, we normally concentrate on the teaching, the theological teaching, the moral teaching, which is correct. But if we look at the details of people and places, we find that it's quite different to what happened in Acts. I don't want to go through any more in detail. You can read them all in my book, Paul, a Missionary of Journey, Genius, where I actually deal with this 4th missionary journey. Now, there's a number of people who have spotted this, and one of them is Chris and Jennifer Taylor in Bible Journey. They produced this map on the left there, and they have Paul leaving Rome and going to Crete. You can see the long arrow, number 1, all the way down there. And then they have him going to Miletus, then up to Ephesus, then up to Troas, across to Philippi, and then, of course, he's going to go through Thessalonica and Berea, and then down to Corinth, and then up to Nicopolis, and then across the Horn of Italy and up to Rome. Whether they're writing that, I don't know, but I have no better idea. I think that's a pretty good idea. Other people have suggested that from Rome he went first to Spain and then to Crete. Well, that's a lovely idea. We have no implications that he did go to Spain. We know he wanted to go to Spain. In a number of letters he mentions that. But anyways, it's pretty clear that this was another missionary journey. I said the 4th, but of course it could have been the 5th, because we often forget about that 3 years in Arabia, where he was doing lots of teaching there, and I don't know how many synagogues he would have gone round in Arabia. Then we have the 3 detailed for us in the book of Acts, and then this one. So Paul was quite a dynamic person, wasn't he? Incredible. And it's interesting when he gets to Crete, he says, the reason I left you in Crete was that you might put in order what I left unfinished and appoint elders in every town as I directed you. This is giving Titus responsibility. And Titus actually is the first Gentile leader we read about in the New Testament, maybe the only one. Titus came on the scene quite early on. We read about him first in Galatians, where he went up with Paul and Barnabas. He was a Greek in Jerusalem, where they saw Peter, James, and John. It's clear that Titus was not circumcised, and nobody batted an eyelid about it. That was fine. He was obviously from Antioch, and one of those early Greeks who believed. So by this time, goodness knows how many years had gone by, 15 or more at least. And so he had learned a lot, he taught a lot, he'd been with Paul on some of his missionary journeys, as we can read from Corinthians. When Paul was in Ephesus for that 3 years, Titus was going across to Corinth and sorting stuff out there. So he had matured, and now he is left in charge, if you like, of the churches in Crete. It always tells us too that when Paul talks about Miletus in 2 Timothy 4:20, he said, I left Trophimus, who was ill, at Miletus. Well, why didn't Paul heal him? He didn't leave anyone ill on Malta. Well, we'll come on to that in the last talk of the series, the next talk. And then he talks about Nicopolis. Do your best to come to me at Nicopolis, for I have decided to winter there. So come on, Titus, I need you. You've sorted out Crete, and in actual fact, Titus has gone off to Dalmatia. Now Paul wants him to come to him in Nicopolis. Now you can see Nicopolis here on the north of west of Corinth, just below Macedonia. Dalmatia is further north on the eastern side of the Adriatic Sea. So Titus went from Crete to Dalmatia, and as soon as I sent Artemas or Tychicus to you, do your best to come to me at Nicopolis, because I've decided to winter there. So there he is. He wants to see Titus at Nicopolis. So Paul is doing quite a lot again on this last missionary journey. We don't have a great deal of details about it because Luke, the chronologer, may not have been with him, or if he did, it's never got published. 2 Timothy is Paul's last letter, and he is giving Timothy an update on his situation. And it's not a good update. In 2 Timothy 4:14 he says, Alexander the metal worker did me great harm. The Lord will repay him for what he has done. You too should be on your guard against him, because he strongly opposes our message. Wow. What was the great harm that Alexander the metalworker did? Well, whatever it was, it seems that Paul has ended up in prison. In Nicopolis, probably. Alexander opposed the Christian message, opposed the message about Jesus. What did he accuse Paul of? Well, Paul says, at my first defense, no one came to my support, but everyone deserted me. May it not be held against them. Oh, none of the Christians around came to Paul's defense. What's happening here? Well, let's have a think about it. If Paul was arrested in Nicopolis, what would he do? Well, he would do what he did in Caesarea, appeal to Caesar. Yeah, that's right, that's true. He would appeal to Caesar. And Caesar was still Nero. But Nero had changed. The first 5 years of Nero's reign was a beautiful time, actually. Nero did a good job, but he was guided by Seneca and other people. But eventually Nero got a bit stroppy and started wanting to do his own thing, and the power went to his head and he wouldn't follow Seneca's advice, and in the end he had Seneca killed. So Nero had changed. And they began to realize that this Christianity, this sect, was not a licensed religion. It was a new religion. It wasn't an old and established tradition with long traditions behind them. Anyway, if he appealed to Caesar, that would mean a trip to Rome and a period of imprisonment until his case was heard. So that seems to be the situation. So, if he's appealing to Caesar, and if he's going to go to Rome, therefore, it's pretty obvious Paul is not expecting imminent death. Because he says in 2 Timothy 4:12, when you come, bring the cloak that I left with Carpus at Troas, and my scrolls, and especially the parchments. Parchments is what you wrote on. So Paul was clearly intending to do some study and clearly intending to do some writing. And he knew he would be in Rome for, I don't know how long. He also says an interesting little bit here just before that. He says, only Luke is with me. And he tells Timothy to get Mark and bring him with you, because he is helpful to me in my ministry. That's lovely to know that, because if you remember when we were looking in the book of Acts, just after the Jerusalem Council, when Paul and Barnabas came back with Silas and Judas with a letter from the Jerusalem Council, they decided they were going to go back on another missionary journey and take the letter with them. Barnabas wanted to take Mark, but Paul would have nothing to do with it because he had deserted them on their first missionary journey. This caused Barnabas and Paul to quarrel so violently they separated. But actual fact, it's pretty obvious they got back together again, because Barnabas is mentioned affectionately by Paul in 1 Corinthians 9:6. Here we have a nice reference to Mark, and also in Colossians 4:10, which tells us that when Paul was in prison with Rome, Mark was there with him, not necessarily in prison, but visiting him. So that's the situation. So in Rome, what was Paul expecting this time? I don't expect it would be a comfortable house arrest where all his friends would be allowed to come and see him. The situation has changed. Herod had changed. So 2 Timothy 4:6 says this, for I am already being poured out like a drink offering, and the time for my departure is near. I have fought the good fight. I have finished the race. I have kept the faith. Now there is in store for me the crown of righteousness, which the Lord, the righteous judge, will award to me on that day, and not only to me, but also to all who have longed for his appearing. Now this word departure is a bit ambiguous. It's also used of ships leaving port. So is Paul saying here, for I am being poured out like a drink offering, and the time for my departure from Nicopolis to Rome is near. I'm going to get on that boat. Well, yeah, that's not going to be a good trip. Or is he talking about his death, as many people seem to think? Well, as I said, I don't think he's thinking of an imminent death here, because he wants his scroll, he wants his parchments. So it maybe is talking about his departure by boat across to the heel of Italy. But anyway, it's a lovely tribute. God has told him that there's a crown of righteousness in store for him. And I hope in this series you have seen that Paul has fought the good fight, and he has finished the race, and he has kept the faith. Yes, he was commissioned on that road to Damascus to take the Lord's name before the Gentiles and their kings and before the people of Israel, and he certainly did that. And he was also told how much he would suffer in doing that. And he did suffer. He did have a fight on his hands, and he fought a good fight. And he'd seemed to have been everywhere now that the Lord wanted him to go. He'd finished the race, and throughout this arduous time he had kept the faith. So now there is in store for me the crown of righteousness, which the Lord, the righteous judge, will award to me on that day, and not only to me, but also to all who have longed for his appearing. That's it, isn't it? So let us ask ourselves this question. Do we long for his appearing? Well, I do, I must admit. The sooner the Lord comes back, the better, actually. It may prove some of my theology wrong, but I don't care. The sooner he comes back, the better. And of course, Colossians 3:4 says, when Christ, who is your life, appears, then you will appear with him in glory. So that's why we should long for his appearing, because when he appears, we will appear with him in glory. That is our hope. I'm going to finish here now on this study, but next time I want to take an overall view and bring to your attention some points that we've missed out. So may God bless us all. Amen.